Okay, so we've picked the apples and we've peeled the apples, and there are a lot of them. Actually, 1, 2, 3, 4 full 2-pound bags, 2-gallon bags. It's time to actually do something with the apples. And after giving it some serious thought, I realized we don't really use applesauce. We don't eat a lot of applesauce. What we do use is slices for pies. We make a lot of pies, especially Thanksgiving and Christmas. And so my guest today is this guy right here. This is my husband. And he knows about canning. So we're not going to can the sliced apples. We're going to put those in the freezer, so that's a non-starter. But we're going to make and can apple butter, because they make nice gifts, but also we do eat that on toast and other things. So to show us the canning process, since he knows how to do stuff, and I have no idea how to do practical stuff, he's going to show us the canning process and kind of introduce us to the tools that you're going to need, and then I can follow a recipe so I can do the cooking part. So let's get started. So peeling the apples is only half the battle. You have to you have to core and quarter them. So instead of using the little machine, I'm going to just do it by hand, because these apples, real apples that come from like somebody's orchard, are not evenly enough shaped for that core to work. So I'm just going to cut them in half, quarter them like that, and then cut the core out. They do not have to be pretty and white. They can be a little brown, as apples get when they've already been peeled, because they're going to be cooked anyway. So you just quarter it and slice it. And yeah, you lose a little bit of the apple meat, but it really doesn't matter. Now, what I don't know is the recipe that I'm using from this book, which is a book I happened to buy back in the early 2000s and have never once used because never had time. The recipe says 6 pounds of apples, peeled, cored, and quartered. So I really don't know how many apples I have until I've peeled them, cored them, and quartered them, and then weighed them. And for that, I just brought down my bathroom scale. My little food scale is not going to be big enough to measure pounds of apples. So yeah, we just need to get all of these done. Primarily, I want to do the apple slices, but I need 6 pounds of these puppies to do 4 pints of apple butter. So I'm hoping that I have enough left. Look who showed up to help me. This many apples, 6 pounds is going to take us quite a while to get all these cords, so hubby jumped in. All right, I've got my apples in this big tall pot. I've got my cookbook ready to go. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the recipe. First of all, I looked in my 1940s cookbook and in my 1950 cookbook, and I did not find anything about canning in there, or I was going to share it with you. Surprisingly, I would have thought in a day like 1942-43, when that cookbook was published, and everything was done from home because they had just gone through the Big Depression, the Great Depression, and they were in rationing because of the war, that there would have been a whole section about canning and preserving, but there wasn't. So, as I mentioned before, I got this back in, I don't know when. I think I was overseas dreaming about being here and retired, and I ordered this book, Home Preserving 400 Delicious and Creative Recipes for Today, edited by Judy Kingery and Lauren Devine. So now it's coming in handy. And the recipe calls for 6 pounds of apples peeled, cored, and quartered. I've got 12 because I want to do 8 pints of apple butter, not 4. And oh my gosh, you know what? It says makes about 8 8-ounce jars. Okay, so I'll have 16 little jars of apple butter, even better. Lots and lots for gifts. Sweet apple cider, 2 cups. So for this, I'm doubling the recipe. It'll be 4 cups. ground cinnamon and ground cloves, and I'll do those to taste, although it does say 1.5 teaspoons and 1/2 teaspoons, and we'll double that. I'll put the recipe in the link, but I just wanted to give you an idea of what apple butter has in it. It does not have butter in it. It's just called butter because it's thick. It's the consistency of butter. So I'm gonna get started. In retrospect, lesson learned, need a pot that's a bit shorter and wider, because stirring these, because it's so tall, the liquid's all down at the bottom, stirring these is proving to be a bit of a challenge. So I'm gonna check these now and see if they're boiling down. I gotta stir pretty constantly. It's already getting easier. They're settling in, they're starting to get mushy. Each time I take off this lid, you can see it gets a little lower, and the liquid at the bottom is certainly very hot. It's going to take a bit longer than the 30 minutes they said in the recipe, because the recipe is for 6 pounds of apples, and I've got 12 in the pot. So yeah, I estimate it'll double the time as well as double everything in the recipe. So probably an hour. I just was checking the time. We've been on the stove for about 45 minutes. The liquid is closer to the top, the apples are closer to the bottom. That's the way it's supposed to be. And it looks like we got another 15 or so minutes, maybe a little bit longer. Okay, the next part of the recipe says to, in small batches, take the softened apple, run it through a food processor. I do have an immersion blender, but I think that would be really not easy. To process them just enough that they're kind of not liquefied, but a little lumpy. And then I'll put them back in here and I'll cook them with the sugar. And it does say stainless steel pot, so that's what I'm using. I think this is, well, I know this is a smaller pot, but I think we'll be okay because it has reduced down to about half. So I'm gonna get something a lot less messy. I'm gonna get this. This is gonna be a sticky, icky mess no matter what I do. Because I have done things like this before, not necessarily canning, but there's still some pretty big chunks in there. But it's looking a bit like apple sauce and apple butter. What the articles I've read said apple butter is just a thicker applesauce. So you know what, I'm gonna stop there. I don't wanna liquefy it. And then I'll just continue to do this in batches until this is all done and this is full of the apple buttery type stuff. We have the puree in this pot. Now we're gonna add the sugar. It's a lot of sugar, and I'm telling you, I tried some of that and it's already pretty sweet. So this is gonna be super sweet stuff. But you know, back in the day, back in the pioneering days when they were doing this, they didn't worry so much about the amount of sugar that they had because they worked hard physically all day. The one thing it does say is that you need to stir this continuously. So that's what I'm gonna do. Okay, I've added the sugar. And now I'm gonna reduce this heat just a bit. And I'm gonna add the cinnamon and cloves. And I thought the house smelled good with just the apples. I'm sure it's going to smell superb with the with the cinnamon and cloves and the sugar added. It says medium-high heat. And I guess, oh my gosh, that smells like every holiday. It's wonderful. And it says to just continue stirring. So I'm going to do that, and the sugar should kind of make it real sticky. It should thicken also, continue to thicken. There's still some pretty big chunks in here. Just every once in a while, one will kind of come to the surface. I'm going to use my immersion blender to kind of deal with those just a little bit. I don't want great big chunks. These were like 1-inch chunks, and I don't want that. I don't mind kind of a little bit of unevenness, but not that big. That looks like it took care of it. Hopefully I didn't flip any out of the pot, because that would mean I'm a terrible housewife. or I'm going to be a terrible housewife. I think that ship has sailed. I'm stirring constantly. I have not put a penny in. And it says, meanwhile, prepare canner jars and lids. I think we're kind of ready with that. And reduce heat and boil gently, stirring frequently. So I'm going to reduce the heat even more, let that come to a boil, and we'll get back to it in just a second.